This is the wildest resume I've ever seen, both in structure and content. I'm reviewing it here not with malice, but with a genuine desire to help, as this is an incredible collection of what not to do's. This resume was forwarded to me by a buddy of mine when he was recently reviewing resumes for an entry-level position at an athletic experience company, similar to a trampoline park. So basically customer service in a face-to-face environment. He redacted the name and I removed some other identifying information, but I tried to keep this as raw as possible. So let's get into it. I honestly struggled figuring out how to review this resume for you. It's kind of all over the place. Heck, I even struggled figuring out how to read it initially. When I was finally able to work my way through it, I could see that the issues really boiled down to problems in two critical areas: structure and content. Now before we get into these, it's important to mention that when I coach job seekers on creating their resumes, I strongly emphasize the need to tell their story and stand out. This resume, unfortunately, takes those concepts way too far. Additionally, I don't know this person, and there are hints that they could actually be an intelligent, hard worker. This resume is just so far out of the box, it is not doing them any favors. So as we discuss structure and content issues, we're going to continually come back to the concept of relevance. A resume must demonstrate that the candidate possesses the skills and experience that are relevant to the role they are being considered for. Irrelevant items may be interesting, but at best they take up space, and at worst, they demonstrate the candidate may lack common sense and good judgment. So where does this resume go wrong? Let's first zoom out and talk about structure. Structure, as I discuss it, can be thought of as the layout of the resume. Visual aesthetics, location of the various sections, and how they are arranged to guide the reader through the document. This resume takes a creative approach to structure. Unfortunately, it's a little too creative. The aesthetics are reliant on this multicolored approach, and while I generally encourage a little color in resumes, I tell people that a little color goes a long way. There are some exceptions to this rule, like when applying for graphic design or creative roles, but this wasn't that job, and it is really just distracting and not relevant to a customer service role. The location and arrangement of various sections, timeline, titles, influences, skills, and community, creates confusion and difficulty for the reader. I really wasn't sure where to start when I first saw this resume. Do I look at the timeline, which chronologically begins way down here? Do I review the various titles, which look like a series of text boxes plopped on top of each other in an attempt to fit them all onto the page? The most organized area is at the bottom, with influences, skills, and community, but even that took me a while to decipher, and I'm still not sure I get what they're trying to say. Overall, the organization here is crowded, haphazard, hard to understand, and causes me to make assumptions about the rest of the candidate's life. If this is what their resume looks like, what does their car look like? What about their home? How about their desk or workspace? Will that be a mess too? Will that look bad for my company and my brand? Will the rest of their communications be this confusing? How will I or others be able to work with this kind of person? See how it can spiral? While I encourage creativity and personality, the lack of adherence to even a whisper of traditional resume organization demonstrated by this resume implies that the candidate may not have the relevant organization and communication skills needed in a job where they have to work with others. Again, this doesn't mean they are a bad person or a bad worker, just probably a bad fit for certain jobs and companies. Next, let's get into content. This is where I was really floored, and not in a good way. I actually thought this might be a joke my friend was playing on me, but the more I read this resume, the more I was convinced this was all real. Now before we go through this, please understand that none of this is bad. This candidate is probably a pretty interesting and fun person. The issue is that most of this is just not good on a resume. Resumes are professional documents showcasing your skills and experiences as they relate to work, preferably the job you're applying for. Anything outside of that, I generally tell people to leave off. So let's take a look at the various sections and sort through what is relevant and irrelevant to a customer service role. Starting at the top, this looks to be the emblem of the candidate's clan or family. An interesting piece of personal history, but not relevant to the role and should probably not be featured. Moving on to these sections. Timeline. First off, resumes generally don't include an overt timeline section. I think creating a timeline of important events, jobs, awards, etc. is good for interview preparation, as they allow you to refresh your memory on dates and accomplishments, but this doesn't belong on a resume document. Resumes are generally supposed to create an implied timeline in the work experience section. Instead, the candidate here is attempting to blend life, education, work, and achievements into one section that just gets muddled. So for starters, I would avoid a section titled Timeline, and instead break it into separate categories. And then there's what's featured on their timeline. I don't know this candidate, but I suspect that these items make up a big part of their personal identity, and that's great that they know that. The problem is that these details at this level are simply not relevant to the job they are applying for. Employers don't need to know when or how you were born, your relocations, your primary school, junior high school, and high school dates, or when you won an Xbox. Sorry about the scorpion sting, but it needs to go, along with your wrist surgery. In fact, resumes should not list anything you would consider under the category of life. It's not that employers don't care, it just isn't really relevant to work, and in some cases may even be illegal to consider in hiring decisions, which is why we don't want to talk about your family, your marital status, your kids, where you're from, your religion, etc. So what are we left with? Stardust spacecraft microchip. I kind of doubt this candidate was involved in any design of the microchip in the 6th grade, but probably just had their name collected in this project. Not relevant. ASU College? Relevant. But the DNF did not finish doesn't look great. Bar Smarts, cert at a culinary school? That's good. Med badge. What is a med badge? Oh, yeah, that tracks. Okay, this is good if you're applying to that industry. It is probably not good if you're applying to any other industry. And this may be a good time to mention that working in a controversial industry can limit your future career opportunities. I understand that there are many things that are much more commonplace, acceptable, and legal now. However, there are still industries and employers that will frown on this stuff. Not saying that it absolutely will hurt, but it could. Next, rope dart class. That's cool, but not relevant. End of life care? I'm assuming this means they were caring for someone else, which is something I often see in work experience gaps on resumes. It's fine to leave in, but this resume doesn't have a gap, so I would remove it. As far as the work section goes, this should be the biggest part of any resume, and it's unfortunately crammed into this little hole here and doesn't tell me much. I see a relative consistency of work here. There's some hopping around, but the most recent role has about 3 years of tenure. This can be cleaned up, but it really needs to be expanded to show the customer service skills as a sales champion and server. Honestly, eliminating everything else on this resume and just professionally presenting these 2 roles with some accomplishments and scope would have probably gotten this person an interview. Moving on, titles. I have never seen a section like this in over 10 years of hiring. This appears to be a collection of things this person thinks they are. While nothing in here is terrible, it really comes down to a question of relevance. Is being a forager/gardener relevant to the customer service role you are applying for? No. No, it is not. Neither is dog trainer or mathematics. Some of these other headings might seem applicable at first, but so many of the items listed below each are just not. In fact, they are so far off the beaten path, it could cause some people to doubt this candidate's ability to fit in with the team. While being an athlete is definitely relevant to a customer service role at an athletic experience company, there's a better place for this on the resume. The rest of this section, however, needs to go. Nothing else here will help this person get a job at that company. Moving on to influences. This is another section that does not belong on a resume. It may be good for interview preparation, so you can answer questions like, how did you get interested in this? Or where did you learn about such and such? Other than that, it's got to go. Skills. The only section on this resume, aside from the summary at the top, that one might normally include. And it's still a mess. Look, I think these are all great life skills, but they are not relevant to the job you applied for. Get rid of the Venn diagram, lose the life skills, and focus on presenting the technical skills in a legible way. And don't overshare. Last, community. This looks like it is written as a hobbies and interests section, which is generally one of those sections I suggest are better left off most resumes. But in this case, it could serve as a good place to briefly feature the athletics. Look, most employers do care about who you are as a person outside of work, but they care way more about who you are as an employee. Their primary goal is to run a successful organization. They assume you have a personal life, but they need to know how you're going to contribute to the bottom line. Instead, I would suggest that this would be better presented as a community involvement or volunteering section. It's not necessary, but charity work speaks positively to character and allows for some subtle personality injection in your resume. Emphasis on subtle. Wow, that was a lot. I hope reviewing this wild resume and the collection of what not to do's has helped you. Comment below, what is the wildest thing you've ever seen on a resume? Give this video a like to help others find it and subscribe for more resume reviews.